Is this the driver's fault or the cyclist's fault? There's a huge debate going on over on X about this video here, which I believe was originally posted on Upright, and it's between this Range Rover and this cyclist. Lots of people are saying it's 100% the driver's fault, but some people may also feel that it's the cyclist's fault. Let me play the video for you first, and then I'll give you from a legal perspective what I really think about all of this, because some people don't, with respect, don't seem to be able to get their head around it. But watch the video first. So this Range Rover comes a line, the cyclist reaches out, touches the vehicle to say, I'm this close. But then the cyclist carries on, the vehicle carries on, but then the cyclist wanders in front of the vehicle and gets knocked down. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that the cyclist is injured, but the cycle is then underneath the wheel of the vehicle, and then lots of people are saying it's 100% the driver's fault. But let me explain just for a moment, and then I'll go back to the video and hopefully you can see it again and understand what I'm talking about. But there's a principle in law called contributory negligence. Now, that warrants a very basic understanding of what negligence is in the first place. Negligence is when you have a duty of care to someone else, and if you're a road user, you have a general duty of care to anyone else on the road. If you're caring for somebody, or even it comes from the old neighbor duty of care principle. You have a duty to take reasonable care of other people. And that includes, for your property, it includes trespassers to your land. You have reasonable duty to make sure they are not coming to danger. So you can't set traps even for trespassers, by way of example. If you breach that duty of care, then you may well be negligent in your duty of care. But then if that goes on to cause injury to somebody else, then they can claim damages against you. The one area that most people, or most claims, fall foul is the causation aspect. So, for example, take a medical negligence case. A doctor may be negligent in performing their duties. So they obviously have a duty of care. They may have not acted with the requisite standards. Therefore, they may be in breach of their duty of care. But if that patient, for example, then dies, but it's not their negligence that caused them to die or to get injured, then the claim for damages is likely to fail because there's no causation there. So then how does contributory negligence come into play? What is contributory negligence? Well, in any claim for negligence, there is always a consideration for whether the injured party or the aggrieved party has not taken reasonable care for their own safety. Now, in this situation, this is applicable because if you are a road user who is injured by another road user, the court will look, first of all, whether the other road user was negligent in their duty of care to you as a road user. But then, how did you act? Did you take reasonable care for yourself? If you didn't take reasonable care for yourself and your actions contributed to your own injury, then you are contributing to your own injury, and therefore you are negligent for your own safety. Therefore, we call it contributory negligence. And if the court attributes contributory negligence to that injured party, that can be anything up to 100%, meaning the court could say, well, the driver was negligent in that they drove dangerously, for example. I'm not saying they did. I'm not drawing conclusions on this video. I'm just going to give you an outline here. I'll tell you that in a minute. But if the court were to say this driver broke their duty of care, they drove negligently and they put the cyclist in danger, the court would then look at, well, how much did the cyclist play in causing their own injuries? And so if the cyclist was so negligent for their own safety that that was the principal cause of their own injuries, despite the driver originally being negligent, the court might say, well, at least 80% of this injury was caused by the cyclists themselves not taking reasonable care of their own injuries. Now, a lot of people then might think that this is unfair. This is why one person commented, this is why people don't like lawyers, which I respectfully said, well, on another perspective, this is potentially why a lot of people don't like the law and think the law is unfair, because this is what the law says. If the driver's driven negligently, that's one thing. But if the cyclist was also negligent for their own safety and that was the primary cause of their injuries, then they are to be held contributory negligent to their own injuries. And that can be anything up to and including 100%, meaning although the driver was responsible, the cyclist gets nothing from the driver because the cyclist's own actions were so negligent that they caused their own own injury. With all that in mind, if you followed that hopefully so far, let's go back to the video and let's watch that again. I'll pop it out so you can see it larger. And now keep your eye on the Range Rover coming from the back left. Now, I agree with all the commenters that this Range Rover was driving too closely to the cyclist and put the cyclist in danger, although, many people dispute those rules, but I don't think this was taken in England or Wales, but nonetheless, it's the same broad principle. So we have a minimum distance we have to leave cyclists when you pass in a vehicle. That aside, I do think that the Range Rover was too close to the cyclist, but let's watch what happens immediately after that. So let's walk it through. So the Range Rover is quite close to the cyclist. Cyclist is obviously aggrieved, reach out and touches the vehicle to say, hey, this is too close, you're putting me in danger. Now, first of all, I absolutely do not recommend that any cyclist reach out and bang the windows of a vehicle, because that's the first stage that he puts himself in danger. Because had he fallen off his bike at that point, he can hardly blame the driver of the car. Because although the driver was a little bit too close, the cyclist, if pushing on the vehicle, had fallen over, having lost balance, that is not entirely the driver's fault. It would be the driver's fault in the sense that they're too close, but now you can see this contributory negligence thing coming in. If the cyclist leaning out and banging the car did fall off, the cyclist is legally at least 80% or so responsible for their own injuries, because he lost his own balance by reaching out and touching the vehicle, which he shouldn't have done. So that's the first bit. Obviously, he didn't fall off, but let's watch the next bit now. So now he continues. Now the point here is the cyclist continues, the driver continues. So by them both continuing, they are both contributing to what happens next. So they are both liable at this point. And just work with me here, because if the cyclist knows that this is a dangerous situation, which is evidenced by the fact that he reached out and banged on the vehicle to say this is too close, it's dangerous, because I infer that that's what the cyclist was doing, the cyclist nonetheless continued regardless of the potential risk going forward. That is legally what we term reckless, where you recognize that there's a danger or a risk of injury and you carry on regardless. That is reckless, and if you are reckless, you could be contributing to your own injuries, and that is contributory negligence. Let's watch the next bit again as it unfolds. So he carries on, and it's at that point there, if you see from this, I can't wind back on this, but I'll minimize it and then go back again, but you can see now the cyclist has moved in front of the vehicle, and it's only then that he gets knocked down. So if we have to minimize it, if we wind back just very slightly, if we go to this point, just about here, he's reached out and banged the vehicle, which I don't recommend, which I think is dangerous. He carries on. Now at this point, he's behind the front end of the vehicle and could stop and chooses not to. Now many people will say, well, he shouldn't have to stop. Well, if it's a choice between stopping and being safe and just let the car go and stopping and being safe, or carrying on and risking breaking your legs or whatever, then the sensible thing would be to stop. That's what a court would say. The sensible thing would be to stop. It is incumbent at all times on every road user to take reasonable care for their own safety. Yes, I still think the driver was too close by any standards, and the driver could have stopped as well. So this is not to say the driver is not responsible, but this video really is for those that don't understand why the cyclist might be responsible for their own injuries. And then so from this point, the cyclist is behind the front of the vehicle, but then when we play the video forwards, the cyclist carries on and moves over, drifts in front. Now you can see then at that point, the driver does apply the brakes. You can see the brake lights come on because the driver has realized that the cyclist has moved in front, but the cyclist moved in front of the vehicle. So that broadly is why the cyclist is, I would say, at least 80% responsible for their own injuries here. The 20% is that the driver could have stopped earlier on, and the driver should have been aware that the cyclist was there, and so on and so forth. But but for the cyclist going forwards and moving across in front of the vehicle, he wouldn't have got knocked down. So let me know in the comments if that's what you expect, because that's how the law would break this down. They both have a duty to each other and a responsibility for their own safety. And so the driver was wrong by being too close, but the cyclist was wrong by reaching out and touching him. They were both wrong by continuing forwards, and the cyclist was wrong, in my view, in the worst in this scenario, by drifting in front of the vehicle, and then it got knocked down. So broadly speaking, that's how I assess the situation. So they are both in the wrong, and the cyclist has contributed to their own injuries. Again, let me know in the comments if that's what you think, if that's what you'd understood. And remember, this is always open to some interpretation. Different judges will look at it slightly differently, but very broadly speaking, that is the analysis that any court is going to go through. I appreciate this is not from England and Wales, but if it were, that's how the court would look at it. So I hope you found that interesting. Please do like the video and subscribe. Help me share this to a wider audience. And as always, thank you for watching.